The Awakening, the Revised Edition, by Lilac Moon, Chapter 23, Arrival on Yavin 4. During the trip so far to Yavin 4, conversations filled the cabin, as stories were exchanged and relationships were formed. Years from now, they would come to look upon the Millennium Falcon with great memories and sentiment. Leia wanted to know everything about the Senate and her mother's time as a senator, and Luke wanted to know everything about the Jedi. So, Obi-Wan mentioned you were the Queen of Naboo? Leia asked. Yes, I served 2 3-year terms until I was 21. Then the newly elected Queen Jamila asked me to serve as senator, and I couldn't refuse her. Padme replied. So, you met Dad for a second time during your first term? Leia asked. She found herself unusually curious about how her parents had come together. She supposed, deep down, she wanted a love story like theirs, romantic and wanting romance of her own, though she wasn't about to admit that she longed for matters of the heart. Her parents had an amazing story. She couldn't imagine how hard it had to have been for them to be apart for months at a time and to keep their marriage a secret. Yes, I was 24, and he was just 19 and still apprenticing under Obi-Wan. I had been fighting against a bill called Military Creation Act for nearly a year. I was returning to Coruscant for the final vote on it, when there was another assassination attempt on my life. There had already been one as we left Naboo. That is when Chancellor Palpatine decided that I needed Jedi protection. The Jedi Council sent Knight Obi-Wan Kenobi and Padawan Anakin Skywalker. I recognized Obi-Wan right away, but your father caught me completely off guard. I didn't know if I expected him to still be a little boy or something. But there was this tall, blonde, handsome young man before me, and he literally took my breath away. I, of course, wasn't going to allow him to know that, so I covered my astonishment by telling him that he would always be that little boy I had known on Tatooine. After he told me that I had grown more beautiful, Padme remembered. Leia winced slightly, and Padme chuckled. I know. I said some very harsh things to him, while trying to push away any feelings or attraction I was developing towards him. Eventually, Coruscant grew too dangerous, and Anakin was assigned to escort me back to Naboo for my protection. We went to the Lake Country, where I continued to send him all kinds of mixed signals. I knew I was falling in love with him, but I was so scared, because I knew the Jedi Council would never allow it, and Anakin could be expelled. That night, he poured his heart out to me, and I shot it down, telling him that we could never be. The next morning, I discovered that he had been having nightmares about his mother. He insisted she was dying, so we left Naboo against his mandate and went to Tatooine. Anakin found her later in a Tusken Raiders camp, where she had been captured and tortured. She died in his arms, and he brought her back to the Lars Moisture Farm so he could give her proper burial. He was so angry, and I was so frightened for him, Padme explained, as her gaze locked with her husband's. Soon after that, we received a distress call from Obi-Wan. He had been captured on Geonosis. Mace Windu ordered us to stay put, but we decided to go and try to rescue him. Unfortunately, we got captured ourselves, and were slated for execution. We were waiting to be executed, when I finally told your father I loved him. It didn't seem to matter anymore, since we were going to die, and I couldn't let him die not knowing how much I truly loved him. Padme explained. Anakin smiled. And even though I thought we were about to die, it was the happiest moment of my life. I would have died happy that day, knowing your mother loved me in return, Anakin added. After the Battle of Geonosis, we decided that denying our feelings was only making us miserable, and eventually would destroy our will to live. So, when he escorted me back to Naboo, we married in secret. Padme finished her story, gazing fondly at her husband. It's a beautiful story, Mum. Ever since Dad, Bale, told me I was adopted, I wondered what my birth parents were like, she said, looking at the two of them. I wondered why they gave me up, and I wondered if they loved each other. I used to think the worst about them, but I never imagined I actually had the best, Leia said, Padme hugged her. I love you, Mum. And you too, Daddy. I've always known you. You were there for me in my dreams. Leia said, We love you too, Leia. Padme said, trying to hold back tears, but failing miserably. A few tears slipped down Anakin's cheeks as well. I'm glad the Force allowed me to be there for you when you needed me most, even if I don't remember any awareness I had while I was in a coma, Anakin said, as he looked at both of his kids. You both have to know that your mother and I never intended for things to happen the way they did. We had plans to resign our positions as a Jedi and a senator, so we could move home to Naboo and raise a family. Anakin told them. We know, Luke assured them, as Anakin held Padme close. Leia smiled as her parents embraced. Uncle Rex was telling me about all the places you two have been. Fighting in the Clone Wars must have been amazing, Luke said. When I told you those stories, I didn't intend for it to glorify the war, Rex replied. Rex is right. The Clone Wars was hell. We were constantly surrounded by violence, death, and atrocities. We were fighting an enemy bent on committing mass genocide and ruling the galaxy with an iron fist. And being away from your mother for months at a time was pure torture, Anakin explained. Luke shrank back a little, but Anakin put a hand on his shoulder. I know that you long for adventure. I did too after growing up on that wicked sandpit, and you've been there longer than I was. Just know that being a Jedi is about protecting and defending those who cannot help themselves. The innocents who have no power, and keeping the evil that will always be there threatening us at bay. We fight only to keep peace and help those in need. The Clone Wars forced us into a war that none of us believed in. At first I sought the glory of it all, but there was no glory to be found, not like they portrayed it on the HoloNet, Anakin explained. Luke nodded. You will be a Jedi, and never have to go back to the place if you don't want to, Anakin promised. Luke swallowed his tears. I hate it there. I hate farming too, Luke mentioned. Anakin smiled. Yeah, I can't say I would have made a good farmer either, Anakin said. Uncle Owen's going to be pretty upset though, when he finds out I'm not going back to Tatooine. You leave Owen to me. You get to choose what you want to do in life. And besides, we're your parents, and you're staying with us now, Anakin told him. Luke smiled and nodded. So, what was it like being my dad's Padawan? Luke asked to Ahsoka. Well, there was never a dull moment, Ahsoka replied, making all of them chuckle. That's putting it mildly, Obi-Wan quipped. Anakin shrugged. I can pretty much take credit for a majority of those grey hairs on your head. And don't let Snips fool you. I'm lucky I don't have my own share of premature grey hairs, Anakin said, tossing a look over at his former Padawan. I was only following your example, Master, Ahsoka replied innocently. And questioning me at every turn, Anakin added. Someone had to keep you on your toes, she quipped back, and they smiled at each other. Suddenly they heard a beeping. Han, who had been keeping to himself, hopped up. Looks like we're coming up on Yavin 4. Strap in, he told them. They did so, and Han brought them out of hyperspace over Yavin 4. He received landing clearance from the rebel base, when he revealed he was carrying Princess Leia on board, and he slowly took the ship into the planet's atmosphere. The Millennium Falcon docked in the main bay at the base. Mon Mothma was awaiting their arrival, expecting only to greet Princess Leia and Master Kenobi. She was standing beside Rush Clovis, who had only recently actively joined their cause in light of Bael's death. Mon wasn't sure she could trust him, since he had at one time been affiliated with the Separatists during the war. But he had pleaded to her that he was young and made many wrong choices back then. And he had secretly been funding their cause for years now from afar. Now that Bael was gone, he had agreed at great personal risk to actively join their cause. He deemed sincere, and she honestly couldn't turn down his political expertise. She was a little overwhelmed at being named the political leader of the rebellion, and Bael had some very big shoes to fill. Little did she know they were about to get a very big surprise. Rush and Mon's mouths both dropped open, as they witnessed Anakin Skywalker walk down the ramp and extend his hand, as Padme Amidala walked down as well. Following them was Princess Leia, and a blonde-haired young man that bore a strong resemblance to Anakin. Rex, Ahsoka, the Kenobi family, Chewie, and finally Han followed. Obi-Wan took the initiative and approached Mon first. "Master Kenobi, am I seeing ghosts?" Mon asked in astonishment. Obi-Wan smiled thinly. "No, they are alive. And there is quite a story behind it. Perhaps we can go somewhere to discuss this," Obi-Wan suggested. Rosh stepped forward towards the group of people, his eyes wide in disbelief. "Padme? How can this be?" Rosh asked. "It's a very long story," Padme said as she glanced up at Anakin. "I went to your funeral. I mourned you for months and endured that ludicrous story that you were secretly married to a Jedi. But I knew that couldn't be true. I knew they were just trying to defame your good name," Rosh said, as his eyes drank in the sight of her. "That story is true. This is my husband, Anakin Skywalker," Padme replied. Rosh frowned deeply and Anakin smirked. "Padme, is it really you?" Mon asked. Padme smiled. "Yes, and I promise we'll explain everything," Padme replied. "You haven't changed at all," Mon noticed. "That's very much a part of our story too," Padme said. "Well, this is definitely a story I want to hear. Let's retire to my sitting room," Mon suggested, as she led the way. Rosh followed, and Anakin could feel the other man glaring daggers into his back. As they entered Mon's spacious living room in her quarters, they all found seats. "Mon is as white as a sheet," Padme mentioned. "She's just in shock. She'll understand why almost everyone had to believe we were dead. It was all to protect Luke and Leia," Anakin said. "I know. I just wonder how my family will react when they find out. I don't even know when I'll be able to tell them. Naboo is too close to the core. We can't even go there right now," Padme fretted. Anakin took her hands in his own. "They will understand, and I will make sure we find the opportunity to see them with the kids. Once they understand that Luke and Leia's lives depended on Obi-Wan's plan to fake our deaths, they'll understand," he assured her, pressing his lips to hers in a tender kiss. "No matter what happens, I know that everything will be okay, because we're together," Padme told him as they kissed again. "Perhaps you should begin your story at the beginning," Rosh said, interrupting them. "Yes, I must say that it is wonderful to find out you are both alive. But I am very curious as to what exactly is going on." "Only a few people outside me knew they were even still alive. It was done for the safety of the children," Obi-Wan began. "Children?" Mon Mothma asked. "Yes. You already know Leia, and this is Luke. They are Anakin and Padme's twin children," Obi-Wan replied. Mon Mothma smiled. "I should have known. Now that I look at Leia, the resemblance to Padme is uncanny," Mon mentioned. Anakin smiled. "Yeah, she's as beautiful as her mother," Anakin said, as Padme gazed up at him. "I still don't understand any of this," Rosh spat in frustration. "Jedi weren't allowed to marry, so when I hear that you were secretly married to Padme, it makes me wonder why you weren't expelled," Rosh said, almost angrily. "They didn't know," Padme replied. Rosh shook his head. "Of course they didn't. I'm sorry, Padme, but I should have intervened all those years ago. I knew he was seducing you. Had I known he was a Jedi, I would have exposed him and freed you from his Jedi mind tricks." Rosh spat, glaring at Anakin. Padme flew to her feet and slapped Clovis across the face. "How dare you!" Padme cried as Anakin jumped up and held her back. "Angel, it's okay," Anakin whispered to her. "No, it's not. I will not let this traitor talk to you like that," Padme said, as she turned a stormy brown glare to Rosh. "Anakin is my husband, and I love him and my children more than my own life. Don't you ever imply that our love is just a farce," Padme said fiercely, as Anakin pulled her back. She relaxed into his embrace. "I am sorry for my outburst," Padme apologized. "You have nothing to be sorry for, not after everything you have both been through," Ahsoka consoled her. "She's right. You're not the one who should be sorry," Rex added, glaring at Clovis. Obi-Wan sighed. "I will continue the story, and let me make it clear, Senator Clovis,
that you were out of line,"
Obi-Wan began. Clovis shrank away from Obi-Wan's withering glare.
"As you know, Palpatine and his apprentice, Vader, critically injured Anakin just before Order 66 was executed,"
Obi-Wan began.
"We took him to Polis Massa to get him medical treatment outside of the Republic. Just before we arrived, Padme went into labor, and just before she gave birth, Anakin fell into a coma as a result of her injuries. After the twins were born, Padme did as well. Anakin and Padme's connection runs so deeply that when Anakin slipped away, Padme did as well. The Doctor was convinced that the only way they would both live was to suspend them in carbon freezing, which would keep them alive and allow Anakin's body the needed time to heal. And so, that is what we did, and for the last 18 years, Anakin's body slowly healed. In the meantime, we were forced to separate the twins for their protection. Palpatine couldn't even get an inkling to their true identities. Leia was hidden in plain sight as Bail Organa's adopted daughter, and Luke was hidden away on Tatooine. I needed Luke as far away from the Emperor as possible, for I knew if he saw him too soon, he would immediately know that Luke was Anakin's son. Then we had to fake Anakin and Padme's deaths, in order to make sure Palpatine was positive that they were gone, and that the child or children, as it was, perished with them. And our plan in that respect has succeeded,"
Obi-Wan stated.
"Yes, and just in time,"
Mace said, as he entered. Anakin and Padme rose.
"It's good to see you both alive and well,"
Mace said. "And you, Master," Anakin replied as R2 rolled in behind him.
"We extracted the Death Star plans from R2, and they were completely intact. They are being analyzed now,"
Mace informed everyone.
"Well, you certainly need a good general for that mission. One who happens to be an excellent pilot,"
Rex said, nudging Anakin.
"We were hoping that you would take the lead on this mission, Anakin,"
Mace stated. Anakin nodded.
"I'll do my best, Master,"
Anakin replied. Mace turned his attention to Luke.
"Luke, your aunt and uncle are waiting in the dining hall. Perhaps you'd all like to join them for the evening meal,"
Mace suggested. They all exchanged glances. "I suppose we better," Anakin said. "I'll have you shown to a residence where you can freshen up before the evening meal," Mon said. "Thank you," Padme replied as they followed Mon into the lift. After settling into their new residence, Padme stood in the kitchen with Satine. She watched as Satine helped Annie put her shoes on. "She's so beautiful," Padme mentioned, as her heart ached for a child. While she loved her grown children with all her heart and soul, even though she'd only just met them, seeing Satine with her little girl made Padme realize she wanted a baby. 18 years had passed, but Padme was still in the mind frame of an expectant mother. "It's still not too late, you know," Satine said. "What do you mean?" Padme asked. "It's not too late for you and Anakin to have more children," Satine replied, putting a hand on her shoulder. "Is it that obvious?" Padme asked. Satine smiled. "Only because I used to get the same look on my face when I thought I would never have a child," Satine replied. Padme smiled. "Thanks. And you're right. Anakin and I have been given a second chance. Not only at having a family with Luke and Leia, but growing our family," Padme said. "And if any two people deserve such a chance, it's you and Anakin," Satine replied. "Thank you," Padme said, as they finished getting ready for the evening meal. The Kenobi family and everyone else had gone ahead, while the Skywalkers hung back for a few minutes as they finished getting ready. Anakin knew there would be tension at dinner. He could sense Luke's anger towards Owen. Normally he would be worried, since he knew exactly what he was like at Luke's age. Fortunately, it seemed that his son had inherited his mother's calmer nature and less volatile temper. Leia had already proven that she had been the one to inherit his temper. He came up behind Padme as she brushed her hair. She was wearing a light blue dress and a matching headband. He leaned down and kissed her neck, and she smiled. She stood up and Anakin pulled her into his arms, kissing her softly on the lips. "Is Luke okay? He didn't seem all that excited about seeing Owen and Beru," Padme asked. Anakin smiled at her.
"Are you sure you're not a Jedi?" he asked.
She smiled back. Yes, I'm sure. But I am married to one, and our son is doing the exact same thing his father does when he's nervous, Padme said, as they watched Luke fidget and run his fingers through his hair. He was sitting in their private family room in their wing of the residence, which included their bedrooms and own private family room. He looks just like you when you do that, she said.
Maybe, but fortunately he has a calmer temper than I do,
Anakin replied.
I think he's just worried about seeing Owen. He feels a lot of things right now, and none of them are good feelings towards his uncle. It doesn't help that Owen and I never see eye to eye neither,
Anakin replied. It'll be fine. You'll see. We should go, Padme said. Anakin nodded. Luke and Leia followed their parents and eventually found the dining room where Mon Mothma was waiting for them. Obi-Wan and the others were already there, and they were surprised to see Han as well. It seemed that Mon Mothma had insisted that he stay around for dinner. Upon seeing Luke, Owen and Beru rushed over to them. Oh, Luke, I'm so glad you're okay, Beru said as she hugged him.
What were you thinking? You just went gallivanting off across the desert searching for that old wizard after I told you not to,
Owen said. I went looking for R2 and Ben found me, Luke protested.
Yes, we heard he found you after you had been clubbed by one of those sand people. You could have been killed,
Owen argued. I'm fine, and if I hadn't gone, I probably still wouldn't have known that my parents are alive. Why did you lie to me? Luke demanded. Owen looked up, noticing Anakin and Padme for the first time. Oh my goodness, it's true, Beru said.
If you want to know the truth, Luke, I honestly didn't think they would ever wake up. I didn't want you living on false hope,
Owen replied. False hope? How would telling me my mother's name give me false hope? You told me nothing about her, and you lied about my father being a Jedi, Luke said, not understanding his uncle's reasoning.
Owen and I have never seen eye to eye when it came to a lot of things, including the Jedi,
Anakin told him. Please, let's just sit down and we can discuss this more, Padme pleaded, tugging at Anakin's arm. Anakin backed away and sat down next to Padme. Luke sat beside his mother. Leia sat between Han and her father. On the other side, Obi-Wan and Satine sat with Annie, Rex, and Ahsoka. Next to Mon, at the head of the table, was Rush, while Owen and Beru sat on the other side of him. The food was served, and Mon Mothma spoke first. Let me just begin by saying that the news that you are both alive comes as a great joy for me, and will also inspire a great deal of hope in the people and the rebellion. Mon Mothma smiled. Thank you, Mon, Padme said graciously.
Do you think they'll be able to find a weakness in the design of the Death Star soon?
Anakin asked. We are confident. We need good pilots, though. This mission will be no easy undertaking, but with your experience, it will increase our chances at success, Mon Mothma replied.
Well, you can count me in then,
Anakin replied. Me too, Luke put in.
Absolutely not,
Owen protested.
I think that's for Luke to decide, Anakin replied. So you just show up after 18 years and start being a father to him?
Owen retorted. Owen! Beru scolded. Anakin was about to retort, but Padme beat him to it. My husband is a good man, Owen. Palpatine stole those years from us, but we are a family. Luke is more than old enough to make his own decisions. I realize that you only want to protect him, but he is his father's son. I think that you know that, and it scares you. Facing the Empire is a scary and dangerous thing, but we can't continue to let them rule us. I used to worry myself sick when Anakin was fighting in the war, but I knew that he was needed. Millions of people died in the war, but millions more would have died if Anakin hadn't been out there. Billions of people were murdered senselessly because Palpatine believes he has the right to exterminate life where he sees fit. Alderaan will not be the last planet he uses the Death Star on if we do not stop him, Padme said passionately, but Owen acted as if he hadn't heard her.
When will it be safe for us to return to Tatooine?
Owen asked Obi-Wan.
Within a few days, I suppose,
Obi-Wan replied.
Owen, you don't have to go back to Tatooine,
Anakin said.
And what are we supposed to do here?
Owen asked.
Help us. Be here for us. We are a family, even if it is not by blood. Padme and I will always be grateful to you and Beru for taking care of Luke for us. And I believe this is what Mom would have wanted. If you do not want to stay here, then at least return to Naboo with Padme and me when we're able to. Farming is much more productive on a planet like Naboo. Anakin said. Tatooine was your home. Or did you forget that when you abandoned your mother to run off with those wizards? You were all she ever talked about, and yet you left her. Owen shot back. Owen Lars! Beru scolded again, none too happy with her husband's behaviour. I never wanted to leave her. I wanted to free her too, but what I wouldn't have it. She wanted me to go. She knew I needed someone to teach me about my powers, and to help me understand them. She wanted me to help people. I never wanted to leave her, but she told me that it was the right thing to do. You have no idea how hard it was for me, Anakin yelled back. We'll be returning to Tatooine when we're permitted. Will you be coming, Luke? Owen asked. Owen looked straight at his uncle with an unforgiving stare. No, he replied. Owen nodded and got up from the table with Beru and left. Padme put her hand on Anakin's shoulder to comfort him. Anakin smiled at her as he felt another hand on his shoulder. He looked over, only to see his daughter smiling at him. He smiled back, knowing he had a loving family that supported him. He wasn't going to let what Owen said bother him, for he knew his mother was proud of him. Padme had told him many times that she would be, and he believed her. Later, after dinner, Anakin stood outside the base, looking up at the star-filled night sky. Annie, are you okay? Padme asked as she came out to join him. I'm fine, Angel. Just thinking. Anakin replied. Don't let what Owen said get to you. Your mother would be so proud of you, Annie. I know she would, Padme told him. Anakin nodded. I know. I wonder what would have happened if I could have freed her. She might be alive, and then she could have met her grandchildren. Maybe if I had gotten to her sooner. He trailed off, when Padme cupped his face in her hands. You can't stop doing this to yourself again. Your mother's death was not your fault. Sometimes these things happen, and no one has any control. You can't save everyone, and we have to accept what happened and move on, Padme told him. I know, and I have moved past it for the most part. Owen just brought up a lot of bad memories tonight, Anakin replied. Padme combed her fingers through the hair in a comforting manner, like she always did. I know, but just remember how many people that love you. And remember all our good memories, and all the good memories we are going to make together, she replied. He leaned down and kissed her. You always know what to say to make me feel better, he replied. She smiled and kissed him again. Anakin slanted his head so he could deepen the kiss. Padme parted her lips, allowing his tongue to slide against hers. They broke the kiss, leaving them both gasping for air. Padme leaned her head against his chest as he wrapped his arms around her tiny frame, holding her close. I love you, Padme whispered. I love you too, Angel, he replied, as they gazed up at the starry sky above. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. Okay, interesting, though I do love Mon Mothma's reaction. And I like that they noticed that Leia's got Anakin's temper and Luke's got Padme's. I really like that about both of them. Rush thinking that Padme fell for Anakin under a Jedi mind trick. Pfft. Keep an eye on him, people. That man is trouble. And, oh god, Owen. That man is stubborn to the core, though I can kind of see where he's coming from at the same time, even though he is very much out of line. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified for whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and non-dino pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.